G'day, welcome to the Financial Bloke Podcast, the podcast for people seeking the wisdom needed to grow their family's wealth and live a happier, healthier and more prosperous life. My name's Ben Law and I am the Financial Bloke. When things don't go as planned, it's easy to fall into a really negative mindset. And for those on the land, this can be an all too common occurrence. Negativity might visit you for a few moments, or maybe it could linger or manifest into something more chronic. But what I want to know is, are all negative emotions bad? Do we want to get rid of them, or are they just a messenger? And if we listen, we can use them to improve our lives. In this episode, we'll explore why we have negative emotions and how, if we've got the tools, we can actually learn from them. We'll also discuss strategies for snapping out of a negative thought pattern and maintaining a healthy mindset, which is key to your family living a happy and prosperous life. Now, whether you're a pretty level sort of person who only occasionally deals with negativity, or if you've struggled with a negative mindset all your life, our guest today, Shane Bird, will have something for you. Shane's a mindset coach specialising in helping those on the land. Now, having grown up on a farm in New Zealand, he's had his share of struggles, but he's learned the tools to harnessing his emotions to improve his life. And today, he's going to share some of them with you. Shane's back with us again, and his episode number 5 is still one of the most popular episodes of all time. So without further delay, welcome Shane.
G'day, great to be here.
Now, Shane, we had you back on, I think you were one of my first people that came on the podcast. It might have been episode number 4 or number 5. And, we talked about some great stuff back then. So I'm super excited to have you back. But for those people who maybe hadn't heard that episode, can you just give us a brief background on yourself, mate, I suppose?
Yeah, nice and short. So Shane Bird, obviously, was born and raised in New Zealand on a farm. Been farming my whole life up till I was about 40, except I did 6.5 years in the New Zealand Army straight out of school. But yeah, like I say, born and raised on a farm, lived on a farm, did a lot of different types of farming as such. And when I got to about 40, it was around about 40, I found some neuro-linguistic programming training and stuff, which, you've just experienced, Ben. And that gave me a whole lot of skills to understand how to help people with their mindset because, I realized that mental health is a big challenge in not just the farming sector, but, that was obviously where I was at. So started helping people with their mindset through the trainings that I had done, which led me to become a full-time coach. And since I've been full-time coaching, I've worked a lot with farmers, obviously because I understand them. I've been through those situations, and I've done a lot of work with farmers, and still do a lot of work with farmers now. But now also I'm actually sort of expanding and going a bit more into coaching coaches, how to help coaches with their mindset as well. Because in the coaching industry, there's a wide range of coaches, and I'm a mindset coach specifically. So I help people with their mindset, and been doing it mostly with farmers, but now also helping coaches in that area as well, which is pretty cool.
Just not to make light of it, Shane, today we're going to be talking about negative mindsets, how to change that. And the number one we're going to focus on is self-belief, because it doesn't matter whether you're, not that successful yet or whether you're super successful. I can tell you right now, there's going to be moments you're going to have a lack of self-belief. So you personally went through a lot of that in your life, which sort of brought you to the point where you started heading down this investigating mindset and how important, managing the way you think is. Is that correct?
Yeah. For me, I was very unaware of where I was at. I was just making my way through life. I was just getting by, and I thought, but I just didn't feel right. And that's what got me into the personal development. I was like, I'm interested to know more. I'm interested to find out more. I'd watched some videos and read some books and stuff, but I was interested to find out more about how it really works. So that's what happened. I started going to those trainings, and it just gave me an awareness of really where I was at. Like I thought it was all right. I didn't think it was that bad. I was just saying, this is as good as it gets. But once I went to those trainings, I was like, holy smoke, this is actually a lot worse than I thought it was. And there's so much more potential in doing this kind of mindset work, working on understanding how we think, because what you think is not the problem, how you think is the problem. So when we get those, we're going to talk about negative thoughts and lack of self-belief, and then we go, this is what I'm thinking, but that's not actually the problem. How we think is the problem, and how we think has created that thought pattern. Once we understand the thought pattern, we can change that on a deeper level rather than just changing the surface level problem, change the deeper level problem. I wasn't aware of that. I was just very surface level stuff until I understood this. And I was like, holy smoke, I can actually shift a lot in my life, which I did through those trainings, the NLP and the other personal development stuff that I'd done. And now that I know how to do it, I can teach others how to do it.
Because I think it's really important, Shane. One of the things that I observed, which was, upon reflection really shocked me, was the number of high achievers I'd work with in, my old financial advice practice, that from the outside, you'd look at it and go, wow, they've kicked some amazing goals. People in the industry would look at them and go, wow, these people are doing really well. But in my role that I did, when you got to know these families, whether they were not doing so well or they were doing fantastically, it shocked me the amount of time you'd see these people with some really negative thoughts and in many cases mental health. And it afflicted a lot of people at a really high level, which really shocked me. And I think, being a farmer's son, I think that the natural reaction for most of us is just to work harder. You have those negative thoughts and, well, the results, what do I need to do? I just need to work harder. And that's what I have pretty much traditionally done all my career is the harder it got, the harder I worked until something did. So what I thought we might start off with first, Shane, is, are negative thoughts normal? And why do we have them, mate?
Yeah, 100% they're normal. In fact, we're more likely, well, the stats are about, for every 8 negative thoughts we'll have 1 positive thought. Because that's the way we're programmed. We're unconsciously programmed to look for what's wrong. So then we go to the negative. That's wrong, that's dangerous, that's not going to work for me, or that's outside my comfort zone. Because what we're doing is we're looking for what's wrong for survival. Like we're looking, our unconscious mind, our brain has 2 primary functions. One is to survive, and the other one is to conserve energy to survive. Now, in order to survive, we have to identify everything that's a danger to us or that's wrong in our world. So then we've got that confirmation bias to find what's wrong, and we're just constantly seeking that out. And then on the other side of that is occasionally we'll have a positive thought, right? But we're not programmed to do that. So we have to reprogram ourselves to look more towards positive stuff. But the reason we do that is because the reason we do the negative thing is for survival, and we're also conserving energy in order to survive. So if this house catches fire, my body's conserving energy now, my brain's conserving energy now, so I've got enough energy to jump out the window. If I'm crossing the street, it's going to save enough energy so I can jump out of the way of the car if a car pulls out in front of me or something like that. Now, what does that mean is every time we go to do something different, it's going to take more energy to learn and grow into that space. But the brain just goes, well, hang on, stop. I'm conserving as much energy as I can. Don't do that. So this is where self-doubt kicks in, because we go, oh, this is my new goal. This is my new aspiration. This is the new level I want to get to. We go, I'm going to do that. And we start it, but then the brain's going, no, stop, come back to your comfort zone, because you unconsciously can live in your comfort zone, because 95% of everything that happens in your comfort zone is an unconscious pattern. So by having that play out, you use zero energy. So we want to stick in our comfort zone. The thing is, our comfort zone is everything we have in our life right now, including the problems, including the challenges. And what that means is it's not a big enough problem that we're willing to put in extra effort to overcome it. So we're actually choosing to have that problem. And that's where the self-doubt comes in. As soon as we go to put effort in, we just go, oh, no, I can't do that, or it's not that big a problem. I'll just hold on to it the way it is.
Yeah, that's quite frightening. I wrote that stat down, is 8 negative thoughts to every 1 positive thought. That's a terrible ratio, isn't it? I mean, you can see why people would start to suffer from self-doubt if they're getting continually reinforced that, with the what ifs, you're no good, you can't do this, etc., just playing away in the back of their heads.
Yeah, and another interesting stat, like Joe Dispenza talks about, every day we have 70,000 thoughts. 90% of the thoughts you have today are going to be the same as yesterday, which means 90% of the thoughts you have tomorrow are going to be the same as today. Now, if you're working on an 8-to-1 ratio, it's not looking great, is it?
No, it's compound interest too, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's where that conscious effort has to come into looking for what's right, what we're grateful for, and what is positive in our life, and consciously having those thoughts so that tomorrow we're more likely to have more positive thoughts.
So where I see there's obviously the mental health issues, but I don't want to go down that path today. What I'd like to talk about is, something that I suppose I would say I experience quite a lot. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm absolutely my own worst critic. I'm extremely hard on myself. I get criticised from other people for being so hard on myself, which is just the way I have been wired all my life. And that's been a real positive for me in some ways, because it's meant that when I'm hard on myself, I'm always trying to do better. So it's never good enough. So from a business point of view, it was always the business has got to get better. It's like dealing with clients. I've just got to give better help, better service, better advice, all those sorts of things. So it's allowed me to get better at things. But what it did was it meant that nothing was ever good enough. you never got to a point where you went, I'm just comfortable and happy that we're going okay. It's better, better, better. And I think a lot of people suffer from that. And especially if they've got really big goals to kick, like they're really driven. And is that a lack of self-belief, or is that, would you say, self-preservation, Shane? Like, how would you define what that is, a problem?
That's a great question. I'd have to dig a little bit deeper to really understand what would it mean if they settled, if they got complacent, what would it mean if they weren't achieving? And that's going to come from all your external references from the past, right? Like if I got my business to a certain stage and I just settled and let it sort of run smoothly on its own and I didn't expand and grow, what would that mean to me? Because then it's all about the meaning. The reason we do or don't do something is because the meaning we apply to the outcome or the lack of the outcome. So then it's like, what does it mean to me? And then how do we shift that meaning? Because we want to make sure that the meaning serves us going forward rather than having a meaning based on someone else to try and impress someone else or live up to someone else's expectations. So in your situation, I think it worked quite well for you, especially because you just didn't want to be complacent. Because if we get complacent, we get stuck in the comfort zone and then we actually we make no growth. But what does it really mean? As everything in life, we're all evolving. Everything's evolving. If we get complacent and stay where we're at, we're actually going to start getting less. So it's really important that we keep growing. But then sometimes we go to grow and then that self-doubt kicks in because we're getting outside our comfort zone and then we get ourselves back, which means we start feeling like we've let ourselves down, which then manifests more negative thoughts, which means tomorrow we're going to have more negative thoughts, which means the next day we're going to be feeling worse than we did today. So it's really about having the right balance, is being driven to achieve, but not driven to achieve to run away from something, meaning run away from a meaning that is disempowering. You're better to actually shift the meaning that you're giving yourself and then come from it from a more positive aspect.
Yeah, and that's really important, that meaning side I sense is when people are starting to doubt themselves, would it be asking yourself, what's the meaning of this self-doubt? Is it because this is a bad idea? Like I'm wanting to expand my business, buy another property, take on more debt. Is it a warning system for you to be able to say you need to rethink this and not just be eternally optimistic? Or is it, as you said, that self-preservation, trying to figure out, do I really want to take this risk on? So, Shane, we're all going to suffer from this. We're all going to get to that point where we want to do something and then we start to lack self-belief. And I think more than anything, it seems to come when we want to grow. We want to expand and do better and, as I said, kick those big goals. So how do we deal with them when they start to come in, as I said, like self-belief, before it sort of turns into something, I suppose the word might not be the right word, but before it becomes something more chronic, shall I say?
Yeah, first thing is acknowledge that it's actually an unconscious programming trying to restrict us to conserve energy. And then just say to ourselves, look, hey, brain, I know you want to conserve energy for my survival right now, but I'm going to stretch myself now and use a little bit more energy to strengthen myself so then I can unconsciously deal with more without any effort later in life. So once we do that, we go, okay, now it's okay to step out of the comfort zone into the uncomfortable zone or the uncertainty. Because you can't have uncertainty without there being growth, but you can't have growth without having to have uncertainty. So it's really important that we embrace all the uncertainty in our life because it means we're growing. And then as you do that, it's just like, cool, what's that one little thing I can do to improve myself? Because I know quite often we'll set like a big, massive goal and then we go, man, that's a lot of work. And then the self-doubt's even heavier, right? It's like, that's so much work. It's so hard. So we want to break it down and set the goal and then break it down into chunks. If it's a 5-year goal, break it into 1-year chunks, break it into monthly chunks, break it into weekly chunks and daily chunks, and only focus on the daily thing. Very much have your awareness on the 5-year goal in that example, but only focus on what you're doing today, because then it won't seem like it's that much effort. If I go, that's my 5-year goal, the brain's just going to go, no way, it's too much effort. But if I go, this is all I've got to do today, and it might only be a half-hour task, or it might be a whole day task. But the brain's going to go, oh, actually, that's something I think I can handle. And just acknowledge that, okay, now I'm just going to do this one thing. And just, the way I've overcome all my self-doubts or fears is actually just step into it. I mentioned this at the end of that training, right? Whatever it is actually step in and just give it a red hot crack. And if I fail, I didn't mean I got it wrong or I'm a failure. It just meant I learned one way not to do it. So just step in there, give it a red hot crack, be very aware of what's happening, but then look at your results. Did it really achieve your best result? Did you completely fail? Was it half a result? But what can I learn to do it differently next time?
And the younger you start doing that as well, the better, because then time compounds. And so what is it? I heard you say once, Shane, failure is just feedback. Like there's no such thing as failure. So if you do have a go and things don't work out exactly like you pictured them, well, then that's the feedback. You adjust and go again, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. If you're failing and not getting the lesson, you're going to fail again. But when you get the lesson and you understand that, you'll recognize the pattern that led to that, and then you'll be able to interrupt that much earlier so you don't make the same mistake. Like classic example, if you met someone who's had a number of relationships, they've probably really been dating the same person. Yes, it might have been a different physical person, but the same personality or the same problems or the same challenges they were facing because they didn't get the lesson in the first one or the second one or the third one or however many there's been. So, but once you get the lesson, it's like classic example on a farm is mustering a paddock. If you always go to the top right corner and they always run off down into the gully and you don't go, actually, what if I went to the top left corner for a change? Then they're always going to go into that same corner. Try something different and go, oh, that's actually much easier. And it might take you a little bit longer, but you're going to learn a better way to do it.
So it's a lot of self-awareness, isn't it? Is actually not just letting those thoughts wash over you. It's actually being conscious of those thoughts and then being able to use your practical mind, shall I say, to be able to accept that, hey, this is just a normal thing that happens. What is it? 8 a negative, 1 a positive. That's just a little bit of feedback coming in, and then figure out what it actually means and then lean into it.
Yeah, 100%. Just grabbing. And the awareness is really important. And it comes from what do I have in my control that I can change rather than blaming something external. Like, oh, I can't do it because of that. I can't do it because of the situation. Or I can't do it because of that person. It's actually what do I have control over and what can I change within myself to maximize my chances of success.
Today's episode is brought to you by AgriCoach. You've worked bloody hard over the years and you've built a solid operation. But as your children grow up and start their own journeys, you're beginning to think about the next 5, 10, and even 15 years and how to keep driving the business forward and ensure a smooth and successful succession plan. Preparing the business, preparing the next generation, and preparing for your eventual retirement all requires a solid plan and a proven process. Unsure about the right steps to take? Head on over to agricoach.com.au/webinar to learn more about our Succession Proof Your Family webinar. AgriCoach, aligning families, growing wealth, and protecting legacies. And now, let's get back to the episode. Because that's a pretty important point, I think, Shane, is I sense that we naturally act as to be able to go, look, this is going wrong or this isn't going to work because of factors outside of my control. We seldom, or not everyone will go back and say, okay, well, what's outside of my control and what's inside of my control? And if I focus all my energy on what's inside of my control, well, I've done my best, haven't I? And I've got the best chance of a positive outcome.
Yeah. And I think the reason that a lot of people will blame something externally is because then that's an excuse so they don't look less. Like people don't want to look less in other people's eyes. Where if I come along and say, hey, I got this wrong and I did this wrong, there's that fear that, oh, people will judge me, people will reject me, I'll get isolated, I'll feel alone, and nobody wants to feel alone. So they go, well, if I blame something externally, then at least it's not my fault. But I can say I gave it my best, but it was because of that situation or that person or that environment that failed. But the problem is then we're living at the effect of those things. And what we're really saying is that person or that thing has to change in order for us to feel better or in order for us to succeed. And what we're really saying is we're setting ourselves up for more failure because if that person or that thing doesn't change, then we're going to continue to fail. But when we shift that focus to like you alluded, what do I have control over? What can we change? What can I change internally myself or within myself? Then your chances of success is much, much higher.
Yeah. And so, Shane, I just want to give you something we can work on here is let's say you've got a younger person, because I'm 45 now, so anyone under 45 is young. So let's say someone in their 20s that's, come on to, they're either on the land or coming back to the land, and they might be working with mum and dad or going to come back and work on the property. And, they're getting that 8 negative to 1 positive. Well, maybe they're getting less than 1 positive. I mean, it sounds to me like the first step is to acknowledge that's the case. What's a way they can start to balance the tables out a little bit more, shall I say? And the reason I say that is the stronger you become mentally, the more resilient you become, and then that becomes a positive feedback loop. And the more negative you become, the more negative the feedback loop that comes in. So, how would a person that's driven, smart, and wants to do better, how can they start to change that from an 8 to 1 to, I don't know, a 1 to 1 or something like that? Is there ways of going about that, or how would you suggest someone does that?
Yeah, awareness is the key. I mean, you mentioned it just before, but the saying that from Tony Robbins really resonates. What's wrong is available, so is what's right. But because we're programmed to find 8 negatives for every one positive, it's easy to find what's wrong. But it's having that, it's just consciously intercepting that pattern and going, okay, I realize these 8 things went wrong for me today, and I feel like only one thing went right, but what else was right? And it might not be 8 big things that went right, even 8 small things. It's because as you have that positive thought of, oh, that was actually good, that was good, and that was good, you're having that neurological shift within yourself. So then you're starting to wire yourself to look for more what's right, what is right. Because whatever you focus on, you're going to get more of. It's a confirmation bias. If I wake up and go, today's going to be a shitty day, then I'm going to be unconsciously looking for everything shitty. Even if it's pouring down with rain and it's really cold or whatever, and I go, oh, today's going to be a day to grow. Then I'm unconsciously going to look for areas to grow throughout the day. So how do we do that? Is one, look for more of what's right. But you can do the classic gratitude and pride is a massive, massive exercise that you can do. And I know it gets thrown around a lot and some people kind of discount it, but it makes a massive difference. Giving yourself 3 things to be grateful for every morning and 3 things that you're proud of achieving every night means you're going to start the day in a state of gratitude, which means you're more likely to notice the things that are working well or that you're grateful for in your environment. And then when you do the pride at night, what I find is it's really good to have a reflection on, shoot, even if it was the worst day ever, you still had 3 things to be proud of achieving. Oh, I'm proud that I pushed through that. I'm proud that I did that. I'm proud I said that thing to that person, because then you're acknowledging that no matter how bad it was, you still had some level of growth. So then you're reinforcing the self-worth. So gratitude means that I have enough. Pride means I am enough. And the self-doubt comes from feeling like like we are not enough.
Can you say that again so everyone gets that, Shane? Gratitude is?
Gratitude means I have enough, so I have enough in my life. And pride means I am enough.
And a lot of people, that'll probably initially not really feel right, because we're taught not to be prideful, are we? And we're taught to always, through the media and society that, there's never enough, And so I think getting this habit of being proud of what we've achieved, however small, and being grateful for what we've got is a great start. And, I started this years ago, Shane, and I really struggled with it, mate, because there was 2 things. One is my brain just didn't go naturally to what I was grateful for. My brain just instantly went for all the things that I didn't have. And I had a lot, don't get me wrong. Like I look back now and I shake my head and just go, God, what planet were you living on, Ben? But, gratitude was really hard for me. And I think the thing that worked for me, Shane, was trying to find even the most tiniest thing I could be grateful for. So, for example, this morning I got up and my daughter was, she'd had a bad night's sleep and she was a bit grizzly. But I said to her on the way to school, I said, I'm really grateful I get to walk to school with you, sweetheart. Not many families get to do this with their daughters at this age. And she was grumpy and all that sort of stuff. But she smiled at me and it was awesome. But trying to find just the littlest things, or I'm grateful that, I get to live in a great country, or I'm grateful that when I got up this morning, my knee that I stuffed up recently is not hurting. It only has to be little things. And same as pride, I'm proud I've actually sat down and written what I'm grateful for. And I think that I really struggled to start with, but it compounded over time, and I could feel in my brain, it was almost like I was training this unruly puppy that would all of a sudden, rather than looking for all the problems and all the things I needed to fix, it would go, oh, look at that, isn't that nice? Or, oh, I'm grateful for that. And over time, I could just feel it. It was almost like a rusty old nut and bolt that just really resisted, but over time it started to loosen up. And I think that's an amazing thing that I think everyone should work on, whether we're younger or older, just focusing on what we have got, because we forget very, very easily, don't we, Shane?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of noticing those little things, because we take them for granted otherwise. And when we start noticing it, we realize, holy smoke, there's so much more in this world or in this environment that I can be grateful for. I always use this example when I'm teaching this to my clients. Is like, we do the pride and gratitude exercise. We actually do 10 in the morning gratitude and 10 in the evening pride for 30 days. what you're doing is you're building a bank of pride and gratitude, right? But I go, guys, your first 3 or 5 days is going to be easy. It's the house, the family, your environment, your job, the trees, the birds, and all that stuff. That's the easy stuff. What about being grateful for the people that stack the shelves in the supermarket? What about being grateful for the trucks that deliver the food to the supermarket? What about being grateful for the truck drivers? Because then you start noticing more of this stuff out there, right? What about being grateful for putting $400 worth of petrol or diesel into your vehicles for the week so that you can drive and to do more of what you want to do? Because so many people go, oh, bloody petrol's so expensive now. Well, what about being grateful for having the money to do that so that you can go and enjoy whatever you do when you drive? Then we are way more aware of all the other things that we're not aware of in life. Mm. I'm grateful for the paint on the walls because it gives decor and colour to my bedroom.
And to people that haven't been exposed to that, to start with, just for everyone listening, the first time you start to do that, it does feel a little bit pointless and a little bit stupid, and your brain will instantly go, oh, why am I doing this? But it becomes a really beautiful habit after a period of time, doesn't it?
Yeah, because the brain's going, this is outside my comfort zone. What's the point? This is wasting energy. This is even thinking is energy. This is wasting energy to think about this. Just get up and go to work. Get up and go and do that other thing. Get up and do the next thing, rather than putting in that little effort. But it's that compound, like you said, the compounding interest. The more you put into it, the better it's going to become long term.
Another interesting one, Shane, just to make mention to, is I remember the drought that my parents went through 3 or 4 years ago, and it was in New South Wales, and it was one of the worst they've ever had. It was horrendous. And I remember going down there and helping out Dad at one stage feeding cattle, and he'd really dug himself into a hole. Now, anyone that you've met my dad, Shane, anyone who's ever met my dad, he's the eternal optimist, ridiculously optimistic about the world, and pretty much she'll be right is probably his motto in life. And he was really not happy with the world at the peak of the drought. And I remember we were standing on the back of a ute, and I was shoveling off for him some cottonseed to feed his stud cows. And these were Dad's pride and joy. And he was getting to the point of contemplating whether he had to sell these stud cows, and he'd been growing the genetics since the 60s. And I remember I looked around at Dad and he said, yeah, he says, this is horrendous. This is awful. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, but isn't it cool that you've got enough money in the bank to be able to buy the cottonseed, however expensive it is, and keep these cows so far? And you saw his whole demeanour shift all of a sudden from this absolute horrible experience and well, it was a very negative place to be, to all of a sudden just that glimmer of gratitude changed the way that he looked at things, and myself as well. And for me, I said, I'm really grateful that this has forced me to come down here. I'm busy, I've got stuff to do, I've got a business, but I actually jumped in the car and drove the 9 hours to get there. And I was grateful for the fact that, they'd got me there.
Yeah, 100%. And it quite often is just that one thought. Here's one thing to be grateful for, and then stacking some more on it, because then you'll unconsciously look for maybe another one and another one, and then you'll just build them up. But when you're it's incredibly tough, especially in those natural environments. I mean, there's massive floods right now in New Zealand, and I can just imagine that guys will be going out. And I remember when it happened to us in 2004, we'd drive out, go to look around the farm, and drive to that track and it was blocked, drive to this track and it was blocked, drive to this track and it was blocked, go over there, the bridge was gone. And it was just like one after the other, after the other, after the other. And it can be easy to get stuck in that environment, but it is a matter of actually just stepping back for a moment and getting a wider perspective awareness on it and going, actually, what can I do in this environment? Got to the point where I was like, well, at least I can still walk around the farm. So I would walk. We had a helicopter ride, flew me over the river, spent an hour over the river, checking everything over the river, came and got me, took me back, right? So it's all about what can I do in this environment in order to be able to manage the situation until it all calms down, until the drought breaks, or until the flood waters, reside, and then getting into the work to be able to keep moving forward.
Yeah. And so is there any science around, Shane? Because I found I'm very auditory and a thinker. So just for everyone listening out there, I talk to myself a lot. My wife sometimes looks at me and thinks I'm crazy, but I think out loud. That's just the way I've always been. And so, but what I found is when I'd think these things through, what I was grateful for, they'd come and go pretty quick. And it actually writing them down, it made a bigger difference. Is there some sort of science behind that, mate, that writing it down is a far better option than just thinking about those things?
I'm sure there's science out there. I'm no scientific person myself, but this is the way I explain it. If you're thinking about something, and a lot, people who can't sleep at night generally is because they're overthinking something. So the thought is in the brain and it's bouncing back and forward, back and forward, back and forward, like a pinball in the pinball machine. How do you stop the pinball in the pinball machine? Is you let it come out. So by writing it, what you're doing is taking the thought, and you're taking the thought from your brain, from an energetic level, you're transferring it down your arm through a pen onto paper. So now that thought belongs to the paper. So now you don't need to keep it in your mind because you've put it outside of yourself. So that, for me, is the science behind that, is you're moving the thought from within and out onto a bit of paper, and then it belongs to the piece of paper. And the journal, they call it journaling, right? It's so powerful because of that process. It's a great way to get clarity on what you're thinking, because quite often we'll be writing something and we're like, I can't believe I'm thinking this. Or you'll be having a conversation with someone, you'll be thinking, then you're going to talk to a friend and you'll say something and they'll go, did you really say that? And you'll go, did I really say that? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I was thinking that. Because you haven't allowed yourself to process the thought. So writing it or speaking it means you can process the thought, which means then it comes out of the mind, and then you can get a lot more clarity on actually what's really going on within yourself.
Should you do that with negative thoughts? Like, is that what you're getting at there, Shane? That if, you're sitting there and thinking, I think you said at one stage to me, mate, what we say to ourselves in our head, we'd never say to probably our worst enemy. And so is there some value in actually writing down those things? So like you said, you take it out of your head, give it to the paper and look at it and go, well, that's slightly harsh, Ben. You probably shouldn't be saying that to yourself.
Yeah. The most dangerous thing you'll ever hear is what you say to yourself when you're by yourself. So it's like, get that out of you. And then really, is this something I would say to myself? Is this actually the truth? That's a great question. Is this thought the truth? Or is it a fabricated meaning I've given from a past reference? And then by getting it out, by expressing itself, to yourself on a piece of paper or to someone else, it really gives you a better level of awareness. Is this actually worth thinking about? Is it really the truth? Or what's the best thought to have in this environment here?
Okay. And so I suppose that's the same as if you've got some big goals, you write your big goals down, and then you can start to think about those limiting beliefs in it and attack those for what they actually are. The brain just needs training. Is that fair? Like, what I sense, Shane, is that, we've got this conscious brain, sitting up in our head thinking, what did you say? Was it 70,000 thoughts a day?
Yeah.
And it's the same thoughts as yesterday. And it just sounds to me like a working dog that's just go, 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 go all the time. And we've got to actually train that brain the way we want it. And we could have trained that brain, your brain, the wrong way, couldn't we? Just like a working dog. You pick up a working dog from someone that hasn't done the job properly, it's going to have bad habits, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. And it takes, we've been training our brain since we were born. We were taught that JUMP means jump, which means spring off your feet and jump in the air. Now, if I went to a school and they said JUMP means you should stop and put your butt on a seat, meaning sit down, I would believe that was true. But then if I went into a different environment, they said, no, it means this, then I would retrain myself to then jump when told jump. And it's the same with everything that's in our life now. We've just been trained to understand life the way that it is, but it doesn't have to be that way. We just got to retrain ourselves, and it's a lifelong lesson. So we write the goals. Yes, definitely write the goals down, but now we have to train ourselves to be the person to have that goal. Because at the moment, the person I'm being is not the person I will be there. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, is I actually have to transform who I am in order to be who I want to be. Because doing what you're doing will only get you what you've got. If I want to do something else, I have to be someone else. And a lot of people will go, what do I need to have in order to be that person? No. Who do I need to be to have the life that I want in the future? It's the be, do, have versus have, do, be. People think they need to have something so they can do something to be someone. But really, we need to be someone to do the thing and then have the life that we want.
I love that. I just wrote that down, Shane. So if everyone listening, if you've got a pen, write this down. So doing what you're doing will get you what you've got. So in other words, not what you necessarily want. So you work out what you want, then you've got to become the person that will be able to achieve that.
Yeah, because if you were doing what you, if doing what you're doing was going to get you what you wanted in the future, you'd already have it.
Why is negativity so infectious, Shane? Notice a bunch of people get together, or you start to talk to your spouse or your friends about negative things. It seems to be infectious. Why is that the case, mate? And how do we stop that?
We all have, we talk about the different human needs we have, which again comes from Tony Robbins, the 4 primal needs: connection, significance, certainty, and uncertainty. Being negative means if you've got more problems than everyone else, you're more significant. So everyone has a desire to be significant in some way. So if you're not achieving anything in your life, for example, you feel like you're less significant than everyone else, so you feel like you don't matter. Well, we all want to matter. So the best way for some of these people to feel significant is just talk about their problems, because then everyone else talks to them about their problem. And what does it do? As you're talking to other people about it, it creates a sense of connection, because we all have a desire to be connected, right? So then it just becomes a habit, because it meets these needs on a really high level. Oh, if I've got the most problems in the room, then I'm going to be the most significant person in the room. Plus, everyone's going to be connected to me because they're going to put their focus on me.
And they'll feel sorry for you potentially.
Yeah.
What was the numbers I heard the other day, Shane? Was it negativity spreads negative information spreads 8 times faster than positive information? Is that right?
Yeah, I believe that's about right, which comes back to the 8-to-1 ratio, right? 8 negative thoughts to 1 positive. So it just makes sense that negativity will spread 8 times faster.
Yeah, which is why we live in such a negative world these days in many cases. So, okay, mate. Well, one other thing is a lot of people will work on this stuff and then they'll find resistance from a spouse or family, etc., when they're trying to change. They're saying, look, I've got this lack of self-belief. I've got these massive goals I want to kick, but there's just this little thing in the back of my head and I feel really positive and I feel like I'm going, but then there's other people in their environment that aren't as driven or as motivated and maybe optimistic about the world. So how can we help others so that they can start to think have a little bit more self-belief in you and what you're doing without appearing to be preachy? Because that's the big resistance you get is people that come along and say, eternally optimistic, you should be grateful and you should have a great attitude and life is beautiful and, unicorns and fairies. How do we do that, Shane?
Yeah, it's the first thing is we've got to understand it from their model of the world. So quite often these could be close family or close friends that will stop us or try and limit us. And the reason being is they fear they're going to lose you. They fear that we're going to evolve into someone else and they're going to lose you as a friend or family member, right? So they're like, I want to hold on to them. I want to pull them back. The other thing that might be playing out is they can't see themselves doing what you're talking about doing. So they can't grab the concept of what would look like to do that. So they fear that they wouldn't be able to do it. So they fear you wouldn't be able to do it, which is them putting their projection on you. So they'll go, no, don't do that. No, it's too hard. It's too hard. Oh, you won't be able to do that. These are all the things that could go wrong. But that's just really from their own perception of it. So they're just expressing how they would feel if they were in your shoes. But then for us, it's a matter of going, cool, that's their fears and doubts coming up. I know that I can do it and I'm going to go and do it. And then what does it do? It means I can be an example of what's really possible. So then you don't necessarily even have to have a conversation with them about why are you doing that? Why are you stopping that? Because when we use the word why, it comes from a place of judgment. So it's more about, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to live my life this way and show what's possible. And then if people start then going, what are you doing that for? Or why are you doing that? You can just go, look, this is a greater way for me to live. This is allowing me to be a better version of myself. And then instead of stopping them and saying, why aren't you doing it? It comes through, like you could ask questions. Questions are the answer. Instead of telling them what they should do, or you should do this, or you should do that, is ask questions. Is like, how did you come to that thought process? Or what's stopping you from doing that? Again, remove the word why instead of saying, why aren't you doing that? Because why means I'm just judging you. So come through that, hey, what's stopping you from doing it? What else could we use in order to be able to achieve your outcome? Because then that's going to open up their awareness. It's just going to come through a level of curiosity, so they'll be more aware and go, what else could I do? Or how else could I do that? Because at the moment, if they're not doing it, they're just so focused on what's in the way.
Mm. And the reality is if you're having 8 negative thoughts to 1 positive thought and you keep reinforcing that, you're not going to achieve what your potential, are you? Potential is a really interesting thing. I've observed a lot of producers that have got to their later years in life, say their 70s and 80s, that haven't fulfilled their potential. And that's something you just don't want to get to in life, do you? There's a lot of regrets. That's regret, I'd expect. And so if you want to reach your potential, you've got to surround yourself with people that support that potential, and you've got to cultivate that right mindset. Because the old saying goes, seeds won't grow in poison soil. I think it might even be a Jewish proverb, I think. If I've got that wrong, don't shoot me. But seeds won't grow in poison soil. So we've got to cultivate our seeds within positive soil. And the best way to do that is to create the right mindset. Because what's the saying? Is it, and you might be better to say this, but is it if you believe you can or you can't, you're true? It's true either way. How's that one go, Shane?
Yeah, I think was it Einstein that says that? Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you are correct.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful statement because if you believe you can do something and you have the right mindset, you'll find a way to make it happen. Absolutely, you'll find a way. And there might be external factors that you believe you can't, but if you really want it enough, you'll find a way to absolutely do it. And I'm amazed how often I see people pop up in this world now that, they were told it was impossible and they managed to make it happen. And it was interesting. This is a bit of a spoiler alert, and I wrote this down to say this during the podcast, Shane, but because this is going to force me to step right outside of my comfort zone. Because I say this on this podcast, it's going to have to happen now, is I recorded a podcast recently with a lady called Ali Flynn, who has a podcast called Challenges That Change Us. And she wanted to get me on there to talk about what happened with me selling the business, having the heart scare. And actually, we talked about IVF, and we ended up recording a whole episode on my wife and I's journey with fertility issues. And it was one of the most challenging podcasts I've ever had to do. And it doesn't sound like that. I listened to it the other day. It doesn't sound like that, but it definitely was. And I have all these little things going in the back of my head that people will think less of me when they hear it. I know that's not right, and I've written it down a few times. I know it's stupid, but that's still that self-belief even I suffer in my head. So spoiler alert, it'll be coming out in a few weeks. I've said it. I now have to do it.
Yeah, get into it.
Yeah, what is it? All good things are on the other side of fear, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. All the great things in life on the other side of fear. Because fear is triggered as soon as we go to the edge of the comfort zone. It's just like the body goes in, it triggers fear. But really, is it an actual fear or just a perceived fear? Because fear is your body's natural response to a perceived danger. Now, sometimes that thing is actually dangerous, so fear is warranted in order for us to go to fight or flight, release the adrenaline so we can get out of the way of the danger. But quite often it's a non-required fear, irrational fear, which means it's not actually physically going to harm us. And I love this analogy. I heard it from Peter Crone, actually. He goes, we go into the state of fear, and fear means that it's dangerous or perceived to be dangerous. Now, for something to be dangerous means we probably need an ambulance. Now, if fear has been triggered inside of you, a great question is, do I need an ambulance right now? The fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of success, the fear of rejection, all these kind of fears, right? Fear of looking less in someone's eyes. You're not going to need an ambulance, which means it's an irrational fear, which means we just need to step out of it, lean into it, overcome that fear, strengthen ourselves, and then we're going to stretch us through the uncomfortable zone. And then what I say is outside the uncomfortable zone, if you stay there long enough, you go into the unknown zone. And that's where all the great things in life are, the things that we didn't know that were out there. I mean, if we think about, husbands and wives, they were once unknown. And there was probably some little fear that we had to go through in order to find them. That, do I ask them? Do I say hello to them? Do I have that conversation? Because if we hadn't done that, then that part of the unknown would never have come to us, and we wouldn't have the great relationships that we have. And that's just one example. I mean, everything that we've had in our life was all once unknown to us.
A debt's another really good one, Shane. I remember my first home loan I took on, which I think was for about $400,000, I think it was at the time. And I just remember sitting there and going, oh my God, this is the end of the world. I can't believe I'm borrowing $400,000. And then all of a sudden, 12 months later, it was like, I'm not really worried about this. I'm not saying debt's good or bad. There's no judgment. But I realized afterwards that the fear I had of taking it on was far greater than it should have been.
Yeah. And that, again, comes from those past references. Maybe we were told that never go into debt. Always only buy what you can with the money you have. Don't put the TV on lay-by. Wait till you've saved the $500 to buy it. That builds up these references that debt is bad. But then, like you say, it's not till you experience it and you step into it, and it's like, well, actually, it's turned out to be a really good thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Awesome. Okay, Shane, mate, we're running out of time. This has been amazing. I've written down lots and lots of notes there. There's some really good stuff there. So anyone that's listening, where can they find more about Shane Bird?
The best place is just look me up on Facebook. So, just look up Shane Bird. You'll see me there. I know there's a few Shane Birds, but I'm sure you'll track me down. Look for anything to do with coaching and stuff like that as well. That's the best place. I do have a website. It's pretty standard. So there's a little bit of information on there. So that's probably the two best places to find me, mate.
Perfect. That's great. And you do a great job, Shane. I know you work really hard with the farming community. You're passionate about it. You've got a great story, which we haven't touched on today, but it is an amazing story. And I know you've got some great tools in your Mary Poppins bag, I think we call it, that just keep coming out and out and out. So thanks very much for that. Now, the last question we ask before we finish up is, Shane, what's your definition of true wealth?
Oh, that's a great question. I think you asked me this last time. Do I have to say the same
I did.
thing?
See, this is the trick.
To see if I say the same thing. For me, it would be to do what I want, when I want, where I want, with who I want, whenever I want.
That's succinct.
Mm.
Excellent. Righto, Shane. Until next time, mate. Thanks very much.
Very cool. Thanks for having me, mate.
Well, geez, that only really scratched the surface with Shane. He's an absolute wealth of knowledge. I'll put Shane's details in the show notes. At this stage, I'd just like to say is if you got value out of that podcast episode, we'd love it if you'd share it with your family and friends on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, etc., because that's what helps us get the wealth and wisdom out there, and we appreciate everyone doing that. The podcast has been going really well over the last couple of months, and that's because everyone's been sharing it, which has just been an absolute godsend for us, so thank you to everyone. And that's it for now. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.